Hello and you're welcome to another insightful and educative episode of AAU Talks on AAU TV. My name is Ajaman Otredako and I'm glad to be bringing you this show because in our previous episode we discussed with Dr. Wambua the future of higher education in Africa and all that we had to do to guarantee that the future we desired for higher education institutions in Africa. And in this episode with Dr. Tim Kiruhi, the Vice Chancellor of the International Leadership University in Kenya, will be discussing transformational leadership in higher education in Africa. All that we need to gather leadership to transform us to the future that we want. So I promise you there's going to be an amazing and wonderful discussion. All I need from you is to stay tuned and don't go anywhere. We'll go for a quick pause and we'll come back. I'll let you know who Dr. Tim Kiruhi is and what we have for you today. Don't go anywhere. You're welcome back to AAU Talks on AAU TV. My name is Ajaman Otredako and I'm glad bringing the show to you. And today we're discussing transformational leadership in higher education. And joining me on this discussion is Dr. Tim Kiruhi, who is the Vice Chancellor of the International Leadership University in Kenya. Doc, you're welcome to AAU Talks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dako. It's a joy for me to be here and to be able to share with viewers and also with education fraternity in Africa.
So Doc, I will need you to talk about a bit about yourself. Who is Dr. Tim Cahill? And let's know more about you.
Thank you very much. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm the Vice Chancellor at the International Leadership University. It's actually a fairly new role for me. I've been in this position as of yesterday, 11 months. So kind of getting to grips with it, but I've been an adjunct faculty at university, as this university for over 10 years. Great. So I had a pretty good understanding of the university before moving into administration, but mostly was in the academic area before. My area of training, my PhD is in organizational leadership. So the topic that we are about to talk about is quite down my lane. Great. And the International Leadership University is an old university. It's maybe one of the older ones in Africa. Started in 1980. Okay. It's about 40 years old. But I was mostly a graduate university with a very narrow scope. So that's why maybe it's not as well known as some of the other bigger universities. Yeah. But since 2014, we now broadened our scope. That's now when it changed also to International Leadership University. And we have programs in 3 areas. In the area of leadership, which is our flagship area. We do have theology for those who would like, of course, to get some background and preparation in that area for their work, and also counseling and counseling psychology. We are moving into areas like education and soon ICT as we broaden our product offering. But for now, those are the ones. We are very happy to serve the continent. We have students from around the continent. In fact, even right now, because of COVID, because we are offering our programs online, we have students from West Africa, from Southern Africa, East Africa. So we are happy to serve the continent.
Okay, so that's an amazing profile. I'm glad that you've been able to build such achievements all this while. But Doc, I want to begin with the very first question that, with transformational leadership, would we say there's any existing policy that had been laid down to aid any leader to be transformational by just referring to these policies and working with them?
Okay, thank you. Let me begin just preface my remarks by first of all defining transformational leadership, because I know it's a very common term that's used widely. You'll see it in almost any context when people are talking in religious circles, in social circles, in governance. But transformational leadership is actually a very specific approach to leadership. That is a value-based approach. This is way, kind of goes back to 1978. That's when it was formulated by Barnes, and then I improved quite upon in 81. Okay. And it has 4 aspects that I think will be very helpful for us to frame our discussion, and then I'll come to answer your question on policy. Okay. The 4 aspects of this leadership, one of them is a leader is expected to be a role model. The term Bass uses is idealized influence.
Yeah.
The leader is meant to be an exemplar, a role model to those that they work with. The second thing is that leader should intellectually stimulate the leaders that they work with or the people that they work with. Okay. So this is helping with them with mental images of a better future and so on, because often leadership, of course, includes leading change. The third area is a sense of inspirational motivation. Okay. This is so important at a time like now when the world has been faced with uncertainty and so on, so that not only do you help the people at the mind level, but also at the heart level. We know very much that many times people know the right thing to do, but at the heart level don't quite get to do it. So the people need this additional inspiration to motivate them towards a change. And finally, there is an aspect of individualized consideration, which is tailor making. In education, of course, we talk about a learner-centered approach, so that the learner is at the heart of that process. Yeah. So with that background, with that understanding, I would say that I think the policies that I'm aware of have varied from, of course, nation to nation, and of course also in terms of their timeliness and effectiveness to apply to the context. There are some that, of course, you'll find that there are strong policies, like on the need of there are many policies that have safeguard the fact that, of course, there are certain things, say, as a lecturer in a university classroom can do or not do, things like sexual harassment, things like to do with of course, broadening the space so that maybe those who have various forms of maybe differently abled or disabled are able to participate in the learning process. I think many universities have got these programs, these policies, but I think not all of them are cross-cutting, and of course they vary. Thank you. I think that's the comment I would make.
Okay, Doc, let me make a follow-up on that one. How are you able, as a transformational leader, to able to ripple out your leadership style even to industry and accreditation institutions, because they are also autonomous on their own? How are you able to encircle them with your transformational vision to get them involved?
That's a very good question. Because in any society, really, the university should be the epitome of knowledge. It should be a place where we are researching and bringing new ideas to bear on issues. It should be a place where we get solutions for the challenges we face as societies. Yeah. And so, yes, this leadership then should not only be confined to the four walls of the university, so to speak, but we need to take this influence because, again, largely we see leadership as influence. This influence should be seen in the community around the university, in the society, in terms of the type of leaders we produce and send to society, send to industry. It should be seen in those collaborations that we have with other stakeholders and so on. So yes, I think in some ways, many societies look to universities to provide some role models. They are distinguished professors or other people that are respected in their fields. When they speak, they are a voice of authority. But of course, also we also have to admit that there have been challenges as well when there are challenges right from the classroom.
Doc, you mentioned challenges. On the issue of challenges, sometimes leaders of the kind with such a transformational mindset may be perceived to be overambitious by, most especially the accreditation institutions, because they are the ones who lay out the curricula. How do you manage this perception of being overambitious in these times like these?
That's true. This has been an old challenge because I guess the regulators, for the most part, in most nations, see themselves as gatekeepers, sure. who need to control what happens in that space. Unfortunately, today's world requires rapid change and adaptation. Sure. In fact, when you look at the organizations that have adapted, well, even during this season of COVID, there are many studies that have been done, but they have brought out two qualities. One of them is an organization that is curious. People who are looking for alternatives, new ideas. They are asking the why questions. Why not questions? Why can we not do it a different way? Yes. Unfortunately, the regulator tends to look at what was approved last time rather than what needs to come to the future. Sure. And then also the question of agility. There needs to be that ability to adapt quickly and implement the things that are happening. And you can think about the organizations that adapted quickly to COVID, they are still thriving. Some others took a long time, maybe they're struggling. So I think this is an area where maybe the philosophy of and the approach of many regulators needs to be relooked at. so that they are more facilitative rather than more of gatekeepers, but facilitating learning, facilitating adaptability, because that's a necessary quality going forwards.
Yes.
If you're not going to be able to do that, we'll find ourselves out of business because the world is changing very quickly, and the learners that we are also working with don't have a lot of patience.
True.
And if they're not getting it in Africa, now they can get online programs from Harvard, so to speak, or wherever else. And what will stop them from going there when those universities sometimes are even offering free courses?
Sure.
Looking at maybe just one more thought about today's learner, the millennial and even younger, they are not people who are also very keen on papers. They want the skills, not so much, taking all this trouble to go through papers. Mm-hmm. So if they feel like they've gotten the skill and you're just taking too much time, they'll withdraw and go on to the next thing, because the kind of learner we have today is not as keen on process and paperwork and so on. They want the skills, they want it quickly. And of course, the attention span is much shorter. Yeah, so there are issues we need to look at from a regulation point of view and adaptability.
Okay, Doc, I'll be asking you more about how do you manage or how do you neutralize this perception of you being overambitious with regards to your plans with such autonomous institutions like accreditation institutions and how they want things to go, because they're the gatekeepers, and they have their own principles. But before we do that, I want us to go for a quick pause. When we come back, we'll hit on the issue about how to draw in these autonomous institutions in achieving your vision as a transformational leader. So don't go anywhere. We'll come back after a short pause with the next issue about how to neutralize the leadership amongst all these institutions who are also stakeholders in higher education. Don't go anywhere. Hello there, welcome back to AAU Talks on AAU TV, the voice of higher education in Africa. My name is Ajiman Otredako, and today we're discussing transformational leadership in higher education. I'm joined, I'm actually on this interview with Dr. Tim Cahill. He is the Vice Chancellor of the International Leadership University in Kenya. And Doc, before we went for the pause, we were discussing how to bring in the institutions or stakeholders to achieve your vision. But counting on that, there is this contention with public institutions and also the private institutions, and who is actually effective in terms of working with their vision and goals. Would you take a side on the private or public and who is really enhancing their growth with their leadership style?
Well, I have had the experience of both settings. I did quite a bit of my studies in a public university setting. Then at some point I was privileged to also sit in a governance organ and for a public university, some of the biggest public universities in our nation.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, no. I don't think that from a leadership point of view, the dynamics, the context, of course, changes.
Okay.
In the public setting, of course, government is a big player, being the biggest stakeholder. But in the context of private, of course, you'll have either an owner, a sponsor, and so on. But I think that's just in terms of the nuances. But in my opinion, I think good leadership is needed in both cases. And I think if we go through the areas I talked about, the leader is a good role model. He is able to help people have a clear vision of the future, and so on. They are able to motivate the heart of the people so that they take the people along with them. They are also able to adapt as needed so that individual needs and needs of special situations are accounted for. I think those skills are needed in both settings, almost to an equal measure.
All right, then. So on that submission, then let me just add up to this that what then do you think will be the criteria for choosing a leader for a private institution or a public institution? Or is there any flat criteria for both institutions and what they do?
In many ways similar, but maybe with some nuances here, and I'll clarify that in a minute.
Okay.
In terms of leadership kind of cuts across. Mm-hmm. And it's been well noted that in any setting, the most important quality for a leader who endures, a leader who is successful for a long period of time, is character.
Okay.
The character of that leader, because character is at the base of trust. Okay. And that trust is what helps a leader to move the organization forward, for people even during difficult times to be willing to listen to the leader, and they can put their trust in the leader to be able to move along with the leader. So character is paramount. Without character, the leader can be there short term, or sometimes, of course, can build on a false foundation. As soon as they leave, usually that crumbles. That's why at the International Leadership University, our slogan, actually, our focus is on developing leaders of integrity. We believe that we are addressing a very core issue, especially on the African continent, where we seem to have real challenges at developing this area of character. So character is important for the leader, and again, that will cut across and so on. The second area that I think now where you possibly may infer to in terms of maybe leadership for academia is what you may call the chemistry between the leader and the organization on the university, especially chemistry with maybe the academic staff, because maybe that's where there's a bit of a nuance. The general administrative staff will be very similar, finance, HR, those are similar to any other organization. But when you come to the aspect of the faculty, the researchers, and so on, usually there is a chemistry there that's needed to be able to do that. So having been either one among them, that's why you'll find in many universities, they will only appoint usually academicians themselves because they are able to possibly better relate. And that's important for any leader, again, in any setting to have good chemistry with the people they work with. But in the academics institution, it's especially maybe even more important. I would say there's a nuance there where that is even more important. The final area that people talk about usually for any leader, again, is a leader needs to have some sense of connections. They need to have their networks that they bring to bear in solving problems, because a leader is expected to be a problem solver. So, being able to deal with whether it's, you're having challenges, like we said, whether it's the regulation, whether it's the raising of resources, whether it is dealing with government or other authorities, other stakeholders. So the leader needs to be able to quickly activate those networks to be able to solve the problems and move the institution forward. So, but again, above chemistry and connections, the character is paramount.
All right, Doc. So, being a leader with that transformational mindset comes with a lot of responsibility. But do you need, because you are the one who has the transformational strategies in your mind, the tactics and the vision and mission, all in yourself primarily, do you need to deploy all these ideas alone, or you need people around you to buy into this vision? Which is which, you alone or the people involved?
That's true. Very important. It's said that, if you think you are leading, look who's behind you, so that if you don't see anyone, you maybe are just taking a walk.
Yes.
It's important that, of course, there's no leadership without followership. It's important that the leader works with followers. In fact, in my definition of leadership, I not only talk about followers, but willing followers. And I'm aware that not every follower initially is willing in an organization. I've led in different contexts, and at times I've had people who are not so willing. But that's the art of leadership, is to move these people who are initially unwilling, and therefore maybe are spending a lot of their time, thinking about things that are negative to the organization rather than helpful and positive, so that there is negative energy rather than positive energy. You try to move them forward by helping them to see the bigger picture, help them to see that they have a role to play and they have a contribution to bring. So a leader needs not only to work with followers, I would go on to say willing followers, those that are, have embraced and bought into the vision. That's why it's important to have this intellectual stimulation that has to do with the vision, but also the heart inspiration that helps people now to own where you are going. They're able to come along with you and they're willing to support.
Doc, another menace that is actually hampering the growth and the effectiveness of higher education institutions in Africa is the interference of political or politics, basically, interfering in how you do your work or on your campuses. With such a transformational mindset of leadership, how would you be able, or how should we move on or progress with the interference of politics? How would you define that in your leadership pattern?
Very good point. This is definitely a heavier issue, maybe more in public universities than maybe private ones, which tend not to have as much political, although it's always there. Politics is a fact of life, but certainly for public universities. I think one of them is, of course, that the institution, if you can institutionalize everything that you are working with, their systems and structures, their processes, their policies, so that it's not so much left to the whim of the person who comes in. And often say that that's a good test for an organization. Can the organization be led even by, so to speak, an average leader with good systems is better than a very strong leader with weak systems in the long run. So if you put the right systems in place, processes, and also create the right culture, maybe that's the biggest thing I'd like to encourage here. And part of, like, even at the International Leadership University, my biggest role right now is to create the right culture. That we admit the right things, we stop the things that are not very helpful. Because every organization has got a culture. And culture is so important. It doesn't matter how well your strategy is, how good it is. There's actually a quote attributed to Peter Drucker, that father of management, that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Sure. You know, you could be having the best strategies for transforming the organization, for moving the institution forward, but if it has a bad culture, and unfortunately politics tend to be part of that bad culture, then it just eats into that strategy and you never move forward. So it's important to manage that and to create the right culture, because the culture alone can admit, and even there are institutions that I've known where people who didn't really fit, they themselves after some time say, I don't think I belong here, because the organization has a strong culture that admits the right things and stops the wrong things from happening.
Great. So, I mean, in defying the odds and running beyond what you want to do, there are some grounding issues in every higher education institution in Africa. You know, the issue of funding, I would say lack of capacity building, weaker research and development plans, HR issues. These are all matters that actually hamper the growth of higher education institutions in Africa. And the question is, with a transformational mindset of leadership in these steps that we need, how are we able, or how are we going to be able to manage these issues and still achieve that transformational goal? Because it is not going to be easy, or it wouldn't be easy. So what, in your view, can we do with that transformational mindset to manage issues of funding, capacity building, R&D, and even human resource management?
Thank you. The starting point for all of this, of course, is the vision. And that vision should be not only be by the leader, it should be owned by all important stakeholders. So that if it's a case of a council, many universities would be, governed through a council. The council shares that vision. Maybe there are trustees on behalf of the sponsor who also are there to ensure that, of course, you don't lose the vision.
Yes.
That vision should also be shared internally within the organization, with the staff, with senior management, with the staff and faculty, and also with key stakeholders, people like alumni and other people. So clarifying that vision is the biggest task for a leader. Sure. When you're able to do that, everybody else can run with you and be able to now sacrifice if necessary, if that's what's going to take, or maybe be willing to go through some short-term pain for the sake of getting to the future. So for me, the starting point is a clear vision that's owned by all the stakeholders. That vision, of course, should include people aspects, so their development and care. It's not only their development, but also caring for them. During a time like now, during COVID, how are we able to express care for those that are part of the institutions, even though our finances have been tight? That's important. And that's where the individualist consideration comes in. That vision should also include, of course, aspects of building now capacity for academic programs, for research, for other stakeholder engagements. So it should be, of course, a well-encompassing vision. But it really is important that it's owned, shared with, and owned, and bought into by all the stakeholders, so that way then you are all moving in the same direction. And even when there are sacrifices to be made or delaying certain aspects for the sake of the bigger picture, people will be willing to do that. And I've seen that in a small way, we've been able to do that. For us to get through COVID as an institution, we've had a lot of understanding from our staff because they see where we are trying to go. Then they believe that our intentions are noble, and we are trying to build a better institution for the future.
Doc, in one of your submissions earlier, you mentioned that a leader shouldn't be a lone wolf. I mean, if you want to see that you're leading, look behind you. It means that there should be people behind you, rallying behind you for you to understand that you are leading, because someone must follow you. But there is this issue of resistance. Some people don't just want to succumb to any vision. Out of 100, people will always fight against your vision because you don't buy into it and you can't do anything about it. How would you manage this issue as a transformational leader, finding some people against your vision or your direction? How will you take that?
And that's why I refer to that as the art of leadership. An average leader will possibly live without chaos. A good leader will seek to resolve that in one way or the other.
Okay.
It could be by talking through, helping some of these people. Say, for example, two of you competed for a position, and you are the one who got it, the other person didn't get it. It's easy to have sour grapes because they'll be seeing what they could have been doing if they were in that position rather than you. So being able to walk over to them and say, hey, my brother or sister, I know you applied for this position too, and you're equally qualified. I want to let you know that I value what you are able to bring to the institution. And I would like us to find out what's the best way to make sure that happens. Maybe it's by them leading a new institute or starting a research center or something where they feel they have some space to express their leadership in a healthy way, in a positive way. So you acknowledge where you can see those areas and also be able to be forthright. Again, when you have character and people know that your heart is in the right place, they'll often be willing to talk about that. Of course, there may be the difficult decisions to take. This is part of the price of leadership.
Yes.
Ultimately, you may have to make the hard decisions. And, even in the 11 months I've been here, I've had to make a few of those, unfortunately, which is, sometimes releasing people who really are not moving in the direction. But often, I remember in one particular case, one of the staff, when we got to that process, of course, we went through due process. There was, the whole, process of beginning with, a verbal and written and all the other warnings, a disciplinary process. In the end, because I decided to have an exit time with him, and I asked him, and I told him why we were doing what we were doing. He told me, I understand. If I was in your position, I possibly would have done the same thing that you've done to me. So it didn't make it necessarily any easier or less painful, but I think he can see that you are doing it for the sake of the whole and moving the institution forward. And in fact, is a gentleman who basically asked whether I could be his mentor, and I talk with him from time to time. So it's again not an enmity. It's just had to be done for the sake of the institution and doing what is good for the whole organization.
Great. So, Doc, I want to put before you that there's a very serious problem in the African continent when it comes to our higher education institutions, and it's all about our institutions that are able to produce knowledge, but when we produce this knowledge, we don't adopt this knowledge in our continent. It can't be adapted. It's poorly disseminated, and even we are unable to commercialize our own findings or our own research, and this is really affecting us. We rely on foreign studies, foreign findings, foreign innovations, and we regard less of what we produce in our continent, and it has trickled down to affect our graduates, because graduates come up, are churned out of these universities, our own universities, and industry, same industry we're with in this continent, is looking down on the product that we churn from the university because they say we are not capable of actually performing, or we don't even have the right skills needed. And it's baffling because we have been through these institutions, industry has been a stakeholder, but how then do you reject us and say we don't have the skills needed? Where have we gone wrong? The issue is, how do we correct this issue of churning out the wrong graduates with the wrong skills? We actually produce knowledge, but this knowledge is is unable to be adopted, disseminated, and even commercialized in our continent. That has really affected the growth of our higher education institutions and even our graduates and even employment. Doc, help us. How do we correct this so we don't actually grow into this gloom affecting our growth in higher education institutions in Africa? Help us out here.
Oh, very important. This is really critical because, like you said, we are guilty of being ivory tower institutions that are completely removed from the ground and what our nations need. So I think this is important from the onset. And like you said, there's a whole team of stakeholders, from the regulator, the government, of course, the sponsors, where they are private universities, the academic teams, who do programs and programming and research, and of course also the business aspect of the university. I think very often universities, unfortunately, I guess in many countries, in my opinion, have not worked as businesses. When they realize that they need to turn what they have, which is knowledge, into business ideas and live on their profit, so to speak, I think that push would also help us to deal with the last aspect, which is commercialization. But in terms of adapting and adopting that knowledge, first of all, is even in the way we deliver the lectures. There's an area we are also already trying to bring transformation, whereby rather than assuming, which is the old model, where you assumed that the student is an empty head, you just pour knowledge into them, and then after 4 years or whatever number of years, you release them to society. We are acknowledging that today, with the advance of social media and all the other forms of knowledge, sharing, that people already come with ideas, even young students who are coming to university, not just the older ones who are mid-career, even those who are coming in. And so the very process of learning now is being democratized more. There is more process of asking, what are you bringing to the table? What do you know already? And what do you want to know? What do you want to learn? Yes, still tested in the context of the curriculum, but the learner is able to kind of, in a sense, be more in charge of this process. We believe that that kind of learner, first of all, engages better, but they're also a thinking learner. And I'm sorry, I think one of the areas we've not done very well is thinking person. So people just regurgitate whatever the lecturer gave, they give back. And it basically goes on without them being changed. So we believe that as we change that planning process, and that's what we are working on, we'll be able to produce better learners and also leaders. The other one, of course, is early interaction with industry. I told you I've taught for about 10 years. Each of the courses that I've taught, I've always brought a practitioner from industry to the classroom. And, out of the 14, 16 weeks that we'll be having, they'll possibly only be there for 1 hour or for 2 hours. When I have always surveyed the students at the end for an evaluation and asked what was most impactful about the class I just taught, it could be something on culture or strategy or whatever else it is, aspects of leadership, they would always say it is when you brought that practitioner. Why? Because they connected them with the real world. They were able to see how they can now adapt what they are learning and adopt it to the real context. And they can see somebody who is doing it and making value out of that in industry. And so on. So what you're talking about is very critical. And I think there are simple, effective ways to do it. And I trust that not only at the International Leadership University, but other universities around the continent, that will be committed to realizing that we need to have, education needs to give value to the society. We need to be problem solvers. We need to be those who are championing the direction that we want to see our countries go to.
Okay, Doc, I want to say a very big thank you to you for your time and also your amazing contributions and submissions on the issues that we discussed on this platform. And I believe you also enjoyed the discussion. You out there, and I count on your contributions and your comments. Please bring them in on transformational leadership in higher education institutions in Africa. How can we make it work? And Dr. Tim Cahill has made a great contribution right here concerning how we can change the face. And one thing he mentioned that was really encircling was that it's all about the vision, how to get a vision and a culture, building a culture that is innovative, a culture that breaks the odds, and that is able to take us beyond what is already there, going beyond what has already been made. And that is what makes the whole industry change. And with that, I think that if we all look at the culture, building the right culture in our institutions in Africa, we can make a wave. And I really appreciate you, Doc, for that contribution. So, Doc, at this moment, I want to ask you if there's any remark you want to give out, to any message you want to give out to anyone in the African continent, be the leaders, be in higher education institutions in Africa, or any stakeholder. What would you want to say to everyone out there concerning transformational leadership and the role it plays in the development of higher education institutions in Africa? I think we all hear to what you've got to say.
Well, thank you. I think, of course, in the words of Nelson Mandela, that the pen is stronger than the gun. In the context of South Africa, I think that reality is true. So those of us who have the privilege of nurturing those who are current and future learners, leaders, researchers, and so on, have a great responsibility.
Great.
And like we kind of close the session, we not only need to provide the education that is relevant, it also needs to be value-based. And I want to come back to that point that at the International Leadership University, we commit to developing leaders of integrity who can also bring about societal transformation. So, though academia needs to be in touch with society, needs to be engaging and interacting with and transforming society. But we cannot do it without a core of character and a strong value of integrity in those that we raise. And we pray that we will be able to bring about value-based leadership for the continent to also see the continent really realize its full potential. We are the most endowed continent, in terms of natural resources, people, land, but yet our people don't quite enjoy those benefits.
Yeah.
Are transformed, and the universities can play a key role in that space. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Tim Kiruhi, for your great submissions on this topic. I'm glad that you came in with your submissions, and I'm most especially is the issue of culture, that your contribution is that you believe that transformational leadership is based on culture, bringing in a new culture that will set the tone. Is one key thing when it comes to transformational leadership, and that's a good one that I've taken from you. And back to you, viewer, watching us from anywhere in the world. I'm glad you spend time to watch us, the discussion. I'm looking forward to your contributions on the topic when it comes to transformational leadership in African higher education. So please bring in your comments and contributions, and I believe that we'll tackle them as it is. I want to say thank you. My name is Ajaman Ochudako, and a great time watching us. Have a nice day, and we believe we'll come your way with another topic. Have a nice day, and bye.